Deem the silence between us. I never planned to fall out of love, but somewhere between the boardroom meetings and cold dinners, my marriage became a performance, one I was quietly exhausted from acting in. My name is Julia Carter, and at 44, I had what others might call an ideal life, a stable career in finance, a husband, Martin, who made partner at his firm, and a quiet tree-lined home just outside Denver. From the outside, everything looked like it should. Inside, though, I felt invisible. Martin wasn't cruel, he was just absent. A man always one step ahead in his work, but miles behind in our connection. I used to wait for his touch, his attention, even his tired smiles. But over time, I stopped hoping. Nights grew longer. The silence between us became the third person in our bed. And then came Ethan. He was a visiting architect on a temporary project with my company, young, thoughtful, not much older than my own niece. We were assigned to collaborate for 6 weeks. What began as small talk over coffee turned into shared glances, laughter I hadn't heard from myself in years, and a sense that someone finally saw me. One evening, after a late client meeting, we stayed behind. The office was empty, lights dim, and the rain outside made the windows glow. He reached for my hand as we talked about life, regrets, dreams, long buried. And when his fingers brushed mine, something inside me stirred. Not lust, not at first, but longing. A craving to feel alive again. I should have left right then. But I didn't. It was one night. One mistake, but one that rewrote everything I believed about myself. Since that night, I've carried the weight of what happened. I'm not proud. I don't blame anyone but myself. Yet in that moment, I was more than a title, more than someone's wife. I was a woman who remembered what it felt like to be wanted, even for a brief, foolish while. I haven't told Martin. Maybe I never will. Maybe I already did, in all the ways I started pulling away. But if this story reminds anyone of anything, let it be this. Sometimes silence isn't peace, it's neglect. And when we stop speaking, stop touching, stop seeing each other, love doesn't die. It drifts until someone else notices what we forgot to. His eyes told stories, the way he moved, the way his voice filled the air. It all started as something small, harmless even, but it became something I never saw coming, and I carry that weight still. My name is Laura Daniels. I'm 45, living in a quiet neighborhood outside Columbus. From the outside, my life was perfect. A well-paying job, a beautiful home, and a husband, Mark, who provided everything, except himself. Over the years, Mark became more of a shadow than a partner. He was always flying somewhere, always chasing deals. And somewhere in between those airport gates and conference calls, I became invisible. It wasn't until Julian entered my life that I realized how alone I'd been. He was my husband's assistant, bright, confident, 25, young enough to still believe the world owed him something. When Mark was away, Julian sometimes dropped by the house to leave files, pick up paperwork. Slowly, those visits turned into conversations, shared jokes, lingering glances. I knew better. I reminded myself of the age gap. I reminded myself I was married. But loneliness doesn't knock politely. It seeps in like fog. And suddenly, everything looks different. Dangerous. One evening, it was raining. The house was quiet. Mark was in LA, and Julian had stopped by with a folder Mark had forgotten. We ended up talking in the kitchen, wine glasses in hand. It was innocent, until it wasn't. He reached over to fix a curl that had fallen into my face. His fingers brushed my cheek. I should have pulled away. I should have changed the subject, but I didn't, because in that moment, I felt seen, not as a wife, not as someone's second thought, but as a woman, desired, real, alive. What happened after was a mistake, a choice I made in weakness, not passion. And no matter how many times I replay it in my head, nothing can undo it. I haven't told Mark. I don't think I ever will. But that night changed me. It reminded me how far people can drift when love turns into habit and habits turn into silence. His name was Jason, 22, charming, confident, and far too perceptive for his age. He was my tenant, a quiet young man renting the basement apartment since starting graduate school nearby. When I first met him, I was simply his landlord. A 45-year-old woman with a well-manicured home, a successful husband who was rarely around, and a hollow space inside me I hadn't acknowledged in years. My husband, Mark, was always travelling. Deals, clients, meetings, his schedule was packed. Our marriage had become a routine of silence and small talk. I filled my days with yoga, gardening, and work at the local gallery. But the nights were long, quiet, and heavy. Jason had moved in that spring, polite, respectful. We made small talk in the kitchen sometimes. I'd find myself offering him coffee, asking about his classes. He told me he studied literature. He liked poetry. One day, I asked him what his favourite line was. He said, "I crave a love so deep the ocean would be jealous." That line haunted me. That summer night, the rain came hard. Thunder rolled across the sky like distant anger. Mark was in Dallas again. Jason knocked on the back door. Power had gone out in the basement. I invited him in while he waited for the electrician. We shared a bottle of wine. One bottle became two. We talked about everything: his dreams, my disappointments, his fears, my loneliness. I told him things I hadn't told anyone in years. And then he touched my hand. Just briefly. But it didn't feel casual. I could have pulled away. Should have. But I didn't. He leaned in. I let him. Our lips met, hesitant at first, then deeper. The guilt didn't come until later. In that moment, I felt wanted, seen, alive. We didn't speak during. Only our breathing filled the room. When it was over, I lay there, numb, staring at the ceiling, waiting for the wave of shame to drown me. It came at dawn. I wrapped myself in a blanket and sat in the kitchen, cradling cold coffee in my hands. Jason came upstairs, shirtless, calm. He said, "Morning," like nothing had changed. I couldn't even speak. I had crossed a line, not illegal, maybe, but deeply wrong. I was married. He was young. I had been lonely, yes, but that didn't excuse it. My heart was heavy with guilt, and I knew that no matter how I tried to explain it, to myself or to anyone else, the damage had already been done. Not when everything inside me screamed that it was wrong, but instead of touching me again, Jason stepped back. He leaned against the kitchen sink and just looked at me. "I'm not sorry," he said calmly. My eyes snapped to his face. He stared at me with quiet certainty. "I know you think you're supposed to regret it," he continued, "but I don't. I've wanted this for a long time. You just never noticed." I was stunned, horrified, not by him, but by myself. "Don't say that," I whispered. "Why not?" "It's true." He turned and walked out, leaving me alone with the echo of his words and a storm of guilt crashing through me. That night had been a mistake, but to him it was a choice, and the worst part, some part of me, the broken, starved part, had wanted it too. The days that followed were unbearable. Jason acted like nothing had changed, like we had shared something intimate and sacred. But to me, it felt like I was walking on shattered glass. Every step cut deeper. I avoided him. I buried myself in work at the gallery, stayed out late, hid in my room when he was home. But the house wasn't big enough, and every time we passed in the hall or met eyes across the room, something unspoken buzzed between us, like a terrible secret that refused to fade. But now the space between us was filled with a secret so dark it could never be spoken aloud. Julian began acting differently too, not distant, not angry, protective, possessive, like he had claimed something and didn't want to let it go. One afternoon, I went to the backyard to water the plants. I was in shorts and a tank top, trying to escape the heat. My neighbour, Tina waved from the other side of the fence. She smiled and said, "Your tenant's growing into a fine man. Saw him fixing the lawnmower shirtless earlier. Lord have mercy." I forced a laugh. "Yeah, Julian's just staying here for the summer while finishing his grad internship." Tina leaned in a bit closer. "You look different, Lisa. Softer, almost glowing." I froze. Was it that obvious? Before I could respond, Julian stepped outside and walked up behind me. He placed a hand on my back, innocent to anyone else. But to me, it was a jolt of electricity I was trying to forget. Tina narrowed her eyes just slightly. I saw something flicker in her face, curiosity, suspicion. "Anyway," she said slowly, "you take care." That night I tossed and turned. What if she sensed it? What if someone found out? The next day, Tina invited me over for lunch. We sat at her kitchen table while her kids played in the other room. She leaned in and asked, "Are you okay?" "Yes, why?" "You just seem off. And Julian, he watches you. A lot. Not the way a tenant looks at a landlord." My throat tightened. "He's not a kid, Tina. He's 24, an adult." Tina tilted her head. "Still." I stood up. "I should go." I couldn't bear the look in her eyes. She hadn't said it, but she was thinking it. And I knew what would happen if the truth ever slipped out. The judgment, the isolation. That night, Julian knocked softly on my bedroom door. "I need to talk," he said. I told him no, that David, my husband, was asleep just down the hall. But Julian came in anyway. He shut the door gently and said, "I don't care what you're scared of." "I need you to know something," Julian said, closing the door gently behind him. His voice dropped. "I've always had feelings for you, even before I really understood what they were." I felt my pulse quicken. "You were the only person who ever made me feel seen, like I mattered," he added, his eyes never leaving mine. "Julian," I whispered, my voice trembling, "you can't say these things." "I love you, Lisa," he said without hesitation. The room seemed to tilt, the walls shifting with the weight of those words. Everything in me screamed to shut it down, to fix what had already gone too far. But I didn't move, because deep down, buried under years of numbness and silence, a part of me needed to be wanted, to be chosen, even if it was wrong. We stood in silence, the air between us charged and dangerous. A moment stretched too long, then, despite every reason not to, I let the line blur again. Some moments in life tear something open in you that can't be closed. That was what the third time felt like. Not love, not lust, not even guilt. Just a wound that refused to heal. Julian left my room just before sunrise. He didn't say a word. He didn't need to. His eyes lingered on me with a look I didn't know how to name. Possessive, maybe. Certain. But mine stared blankly at the ceiling long after the door clicked shut. My body was still warm from his touch, but my heart had never felt colder. I had betrayed my husband. I had betrayed my sense of right and wrong. But worst of all, I had betrayed myself. In the weeks that followed, I tried to rebuild the distance that should have never been crossed. I started locking my bedroom door at night. I ignored Julian's texts. I took extra shifts at the community shelter just to be away from the house. I even forced myself back into the rhythm of my marriage, dinner, date nights, small affections. Trying to reclaim something that had been gone long before Julian arrived. But it was all a performance. My laughter was scripted, my touches hollow, my kisses dead. Julian noticed. He began lashing out, coming home late, blasting music in the basement, leaving girls in his car with the windows down and music blaring, like it was all a show meant for me, a punishment, or a cry for attention, maybe both. He'd glance up at my bedroom window every time he pulled into the driveway, waiting to see if I was watching. And I always was. I told myself it didn't matter, that he was just lashing out, acting like the emotionally confused man he was. But it cut deeper than I wanted to admit. Not out of jealousy, not even anger, out of guilt. Because I had awakened something in him. Not just desire, but confidence, recklessness, something I couldn't undo. Then came the dinner party, the night it all unravelled. David's boss, Harold, had invited us to a formal anniversary celebration at his estate in Westlake. For a while, the evening felt like a breath of fresh air. Polite chatter, expensive wine, soft music. I could finally breathe. Until Julian walked in, I nearly dropped my glass. He wasn't supposed to be there. Wearing a sharp blazer and dark jeans, he looked like he belonged. Confident, self-assured, entirely unbothered. His eyes found me across the room and he smiled. That same slow, knowing smile. Panic rose in my throat. I tried to pull David aside to ask why Julian was here, but he was locked in conversation with Harold. Julian approached me by the staircase. "Nice dress," he said softly. "You wore that one last Christmas. I remember not being able to look away." My breath caught. I grabbed his arm and pulled him into the hallway. "What are you doing here?" I hissed. He leaned in, too close. "I came to support David, and maybe to see you." "You need to leave, now." He smiled again, a little sad, a little cruel. "You still haunt me." I slapped him. My hand trembled. "Stay away from me." But it was already too late. From the dim corridor, someone stepped forward. Tina. Her eyes wide, clutching her purse like a lifeline. She had seen enough. "I knew it," she whispered. "Tina, wait." I started, but she turned and walked away, her silence louder than any scream. The rest of the evening blurred. I barely touched my dinner. My mind spiraled. What would she do? Confront me? Tell someone? Tell David? I got my answer the next morning. David was sitting at the kitchen table when I walked in, pale, silent. His hands were folded tightly in front of him. His phone lay between them, waiting. "Is this true?" David asked, his voice low and unsteady. On the screen was a message from Tina, a blurry photo, Julian and me far too close in the hallway. A voice note followed. "I don't want to cause trouble, but I thought you should know. Something is going on between your wife and your stepson." I stared at the phone, my mouth dry, my heart collapsing inside my chest. David rose slowly from the table, pale and shaking. "Tell me it's a lie," he said, almost pleading. I looked at the man I had married, the man I had promised to love, to honor, to protect. I searched for the right words, any words that could soften the blow, but none came. "I'm sorry," I whispered. He stumbled back as if I'd struck him. With Julian?" he asked, his voice cracking. I nodded, tears spilling before I could stop them. The scream he let out fractured something in me. He stormed out of the house, and I ran after him barefoot, begging him to listen, to stay, to forgive me. But the door slammed behind him, and the sound of his car tearing down the street was the only answer I got. Julian came downstairs moments later, groggy, shirtless, rubbing the sleep from his eyes. "What happened?" he asked. I looked at him, and all I saw was the wreckage. "I mistook lust for love," I said quietly. "I mistook wanting for something deeper, and now everything's gone." "David knows," I added. Julian stiffened. "What do you mean he knows?" "Tina saw us. She told him. He's gone." A shadow crossed his face. Then he smiled. "Good," he said. I froze. "What?" I said good, he repeated, more firmly this time. "You were never happy with him. Maybe now we can stop pretending." I shook my head, stunned. "You don't understand." "I'm not yours. I never was." He stepped toward me. "But you said you wanted it." "I did," I admitted. "But wanting something doesn't make it right. It makes it dangerous. And now we've destroyed everything." He didn't respond. It's been 6 months since that day. David filed for divorce and moved to New York. He hasn't spoken to me since. Not once. Julian tried to stay. He sent messages, showed up twice, said he still loved me, that he'd dreamed of me, that he'd wait. but I told him to leave. I couldn't look at him without remembering everything we lost. Now I live alone, in silence, in guilt, in the shadow of my choices. If I could take it all back, I would. But some wounds don't heal, some sins don't fade, and this one will follow me to my grave. Closing remarks. This story is a meditation on human fallibility, the quiet devastation of crossing emotional boundaries, the ripple effects of desire unmoored from morality, and the heavy cost of choices made in moments of weakness. It is not a tale of romance, but of ruin. A reminder that love without respect and longing without restraint can unravel even the most carefully woven lives. We leave this story not with resolution, but reflection. Because some endings aren't clean, some wounds stay open, and some truths are too heavy to be buried. Vote of thanks. We extend sincere gratitude to every reader who journeyed through this difficult and emotionally complex narrative. It takes courage to engage with stories that challenge comfort zones and ask uncomfortable questions. Thank you for allowing space for nuance, accountability, and humanity, flawed as it may be. Special thanks to all who offer stories as cautionary lessons rather than indulgent fantasies. Your willingness to explore uncomfortable truths helps shape more responsible storytelling. Disclaimer: this is a work of fiction. All characters, names, events, and settings are entirely imaginary. Any resemblance to real persons, living or dead, is purely coincidental. This narrative explores themes of betrayal, moral conflict, and the consequences of inappropriate relationships. It is not intended to glorify or encourage unethical or illegal behavior. Rather, it serves as a cautionary tale illustrating the emotional and relational consequences of blurred boundaries and unresolved trauma. Viewer discretion is advised.